Without question, the most significant African-American role model in those early days in the 1960s was actor Mr. Sidney Poitier. Each Sunday, I walked over a mile to our downtown movie theater to sit in the plush State Theater. On the rare occasions when I saw him on the screen, I sat straight up in my seat, transfixed. I most remember him in movies like Lilies of the Field, To Sir with Love, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. It was not uncommon for tears to roll down my cheeks during dramatic moments in Mr. Poitier's films. I took in his every eloquent word as I sat in the dark, eating my shoestring potato chips, one by one. Mr. Poitier was handsome, proud, and he looked just like me. He made me feel proud to be black. Squinting my eyes on Sundays as I walked out of the movie theater in the sunlight, I always felt a little taller after seeing him on screen. Little did I know, I would eventually have the opportunity to meet Mr. Poitier in person. Initially, I had the pleasure of being in his company socially twice in Los Angeles, but could not muster up the courage to approach him. I could not form words to speak. However, I promised myself that if there ever came a third time, I would force myself to walk up to him. The third time came. In 1993, at the National Black Theater Festival, I spotted him in the crowded lobby of the official hotel in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I probably would have passed up yet another opportunity to meet Mr. Poitier had I not made that promise to myself. When I finally got up enough nerve to approach Mr. Poitier, I began with something like, Mr. Poitier, I was in your company twice before. I could not bring myself to walk up to you then, but I promised myself that if a third time ever came, I would introduce myself. My name is Adilah Barnes. He stopped. He looked through me with his piercing eyes. I think he was struck most by my sincerity, because he gave me his full attention as I stood in front of him. During the short time we spent together in conversation, it was as if time had stopped and no one else existed in that crowded lobby. It was as if we were in an invisible and impenetrable bubble together. Among other things, I remember blurting out something like, "You made me feel so proud as a child when I watched your movies in my little hometown of Oroville, California. I just want to thank you for all that you've given to black people and for changing the way we were seen on the big screen. Thank you for opening the door wider for actors like me." He listened. I was surprised to hear Mr. Poitier say, "And you, my dear, will do greater things." I said, "Oh no, Mr. Poitier, I could not possibly do more than you have." There must have been something in our body language that stopped anyone from interrupting us, because no one approached us. Once we were done talking, Mr. Poitier hugged and kissed me on the cheek. It was only when we began to move away from each other that fans began to yell out things like, "Mr. Poitier! Mr. Poitier! May I have an autograph?" Or, "Mr. Poitier, I love your work." I stood in that hotel doorway and watched Mr. Sidney Poitier move toward his black limo, graciously signing autographs along the way. He turned and gave me a smile with his final look as he stepped inside. I had approached him humbly. I spoke from my heart. Because of that, I had no need to ask for his autograph. As fate would have it, I met Mr. Sidney Poitier again a short while later at the 100th birthday celebration for the late Paul Robeson, given by Danny Glover's Roby Theater Company in 1998. I remember that evening in great detail. It was at the Actors Gang Theater, located at the time in Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard. Mr. Poitier had a front row seat, along with the likes of the late Brock Peters and Mamie Hansberry, sister of the late playwright Lorraine Hansberry. The place was packed. Danny Glover, my longtime friend from California's Bay Area, was hosting the event. Danny spotted me from the stage at one point and acknowledged me with a smile. I smiled back. A short while later, Danny came off stage and headed towards me. He bent over me while someone on the program was still speaking on stage. He whispered, I have a poem here by Pablo Neruda. Alfred Woodard was supposed to read it, but she can't make it tonight. I want you to read it. My heart began to palpitate as I asked Danny how long the poem was. He simply said, 3 pages. I gasped. 3 pages? He said, yeah, read it. I agreed on one condition. As long as you announce to the audience that this is my first time seeing this poem. He agreed. I read. That evening, I experienced one of my most fulfilling moments on stage. The icing on the cake was that I read in front of my childhood idol, Mr. Sidney Poitier. I again had his full attention. I almost melted in my seat as he complimented me on stage in front of over 200 people. He said something like, I was asked to read that poem but declined. I could not have brought more justice to that poem than the young lady you just heard. Mr. Poitier had now seen me on stage and given me his nod. Danny smiled afterwards as he jokingly said to the audience, it's all in the casting. The audience responded with a spontaneous laugh. That evening held a very important lesson for an actor. Always be ready.